This story is titled, My Fiancée's Sibling Deliberately Set Me Up for Failure. And when I confronted him, she chose to defend her brother instead of me. So I kicked her out, and the next day my phone blew up with 12 missed calls from her. Hey everyone, I'm a 38-year-old man who's been married to my wife Eliza for 9 years. We live in a quiet suburb not far from Chicago, where I work as a civil engineer. I've never been the flashy type or the loudest guy in any room. Just someone who shows up every day, does what needs to be done, and goes home. I don't drink much, don't go out clubbing, and honestly, I don't expect much from people. All I ask for is basic honesty and respect. Maybe that sounds old-fashioned in today's world, but that's just who I am and who I've always been. Eliza knew exactly who I was when she married me. There was never any pretense or false advertising about the kind of man I am. Her family, however, has always been different from mine. They're loud, close-knit, and extremely opinionated. They spend every birthday, holiday, and random Sunday together, like it's some sacred ritual that can't be broken. At first, I thought it was nice seeing how tight everyone was with each other. It felt like something straight out of a sitcom, laughs, hugs, and inside jokes everywhere you turned. I actually envied that closeness a little, coming from my more reserved family. But the more time I spent around them, the more I started noticing things that didn't sit right with me, especially when it came to her younger brother Tom. Tom is 33 and extremely outgoing, the complete opposite of me in almost every way. He's the kind of guy who unironically calls himself a visionary, despite having had about 15 different jobs and zero real career progression to show for it. When Tom walks into a room, he does it like he's the star of a movie everyone's been waiting to see. The family lights up when he arrives, hanging on his every word and laughing at his jokes before he even finishes telling them. But I noticed a pattern over the years. When Tom leaves, it's usually with something that isn't his. And I don't mean that as some clever metaphor about taking people's attention or energy. I mean, he literally walks off with other people's possessions. He's taken my power tools without asking, borrowed my expensive speakers and never returned them, and once even forgot he was staying over at our house for an entire week, making himself completely at home without any prior discussion. The first time he showed up uninvited at our doorstep with a duffel bag, Eliza just brushed it off like it was nothing unusual. She said he needed space from his roommates and just wanted to chill for a bit. I let it slide that time, trying to be understanding. Then it happened again, and again, and again. It became a pattern I couldn't ignore, but somehow couldn't stop either. Whenever Tom stayed with us, he'd make himself completely at home within minutes. And I don't mean in the polite guest way. I mean in the this might as well be my house way. He'd leave dishes piled up in the sink, take calls on speakerphone at full volume at 11 p.m., and act like basic house rules didn't apply to him. One time, he used my personal laptop without asking, not just to check his email or something quick, but enough time to change my desktop wallpaper to a selfie of himself. I stood there staring at my screen, completely stunned, not even knowing how to respond to that level of disrespect. Eliza always laughed it off when I brought up these issues. He's just a free spirit, she'd say, with that dismissive wave of her hand. I didn't laugh, but I also didn't fight about it either. I just kept letting it happen, convinced that pushing back would make me the bad guy in her family's eyes. So I swallowed my frustration and let Tom continue his revolving door policy with our home and my possessions. 2 years ago, things escalated to a whole new level. Tom came to us with what he called a can't-miss business idea. He wanted to start a home renovation company. According to him, he had the branding all figured out, the business plan drafted, and more than enough passion to make it work. All he needed was the capital $12,000 to get started. He pitched it to us like he was on Shark Tank, complete with enthusiastic hand gestures and buzzwords I'm pretty sure he didn't fully understand. I noticed Eliza was already nodding before he even finished explaining. Her eyes lit up with that familiar excitement she always got around her brother's latest schemes. I, on the other hand, had questions. Basic, reasonable questions any investor would ask. What was the timeline? How were the expenses broken down? What was his marketing strategy? For each question I asked, Tom had half answers dressed up with charm and vague promises about massive returns and ground floor opportunities. Later that night, Eliza pulled me aside while we were getting ready for bed. She had that look in her eyes, the one that meant she really wanted something. She told me how much this investment would mean to her, how it could bring her family even closer, how Tom was finally finding his path and we could be part of that journey. Against my better judgment and every financial instinct I had, I said yes, but I wasn't completely naive. Before transferring any money, I drafted a contract. Nothing fancy or overly legal, just a written agreement with clear repayment terms. $500 a month starting 3 months after the loan, giving his business time to generate some income. I printed 2 copies and had him sign both right there at our kitchen table. He rolled his eyes dramatically like I was being absurdly cautious, but he signed them anyway. That was the last time the loan was ever mentioned from his side. Month after month went by, and nothing came. No payments, no explanations, not even a casual, "Hey, things are tight this month." I waited, hoping maybe he'd bring it up himself, take some responsibility. He never did. After 6 months of silence, I finally asked Eliza what was going on with her brother's business and our money. She immediately looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting around the room before settling somewhere over my shoulder. "He's going through a rough patch right now," she said softly. "It's not the right time to push him about money." I nodded, trying to be understanding. I waited another 3 months. Still nothing. Not a single dollar returned. Not a single update on the business that supposedly needed exactly $12,000 to launch. Then came the tipping point. I was scrolling through Instagram one evening last month, mindlessly flipping through photos, when I stumbled across something that made my stomach drop. There were fresh photos of Tom on a ski trip in Vermont. Not some budget getaway, but a full luxury experience. New ski gear that I could tell was high-end, a fancy lodge with stone fireplaces and expensive cocktails. One photo in particular made me freeze. Tom holding up what looked like a $15 craft cocktail, grinning at the camera with a caption that read, "Working hard or hardly working?" That alone was like a punch to the gut. But what actually made me completely still was noticing that Eliza had liked the post. My own wife, who had been telling me for months that her brother was struggling and couldn't afford to start repayments, had given her digital approval to him flaunting an expensive vacation. That same week, through a mutual friend who works in tech, I found out Tom had bought a custom gaming PC. Not some basic setup either. A top-of-the-line rig worth at least $3,500. Our friend had actually helped him set it up and mentioned it casually, having no idea about the loan situation. All this while, I had been cutting back on my own discretionary spending, thinking that maybe Tom really was scraping by and didn't need the additional pressure of me hounding him for money. I didn't want to kick a man when he was down. That's not who I am. But now I realized I'd been played for a fool. So I decided enough was enough. The following weekend, we had a family dinner at Eliza's parents' house. Everyone was there. Her parents, a couple of cousins, Tom, and us. We were halfway through the meal, conversation flowing around the table, when I calmly turned to Tom and asked, "So, Tom, when do you think you'll be able to start those loan repayments? It's been almost a year now." He looked up from his plate like I'd thrown a drink in his face. For a second, he just blinked at me, a forkful of food suspended midway to his mouth. Then his expression changed, and he started raising his voice, claiming I was being greedy and trying to embarrass him in front of the family. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Eliza didn't say a word. She just stared down at her plate, not meeting my eyes or coming to my defense. Her parents looked shocked at first, then their expressions shifted to something defensive and cold. Her dad cleared his throat and said I should have talked to Tom privately about financial matters. Her mom chimed in that money shouldn't come between family, her tone making it clear which side she was taking. I reminded them all that it wasn't just about money. It was about an agreement that had been made and signed. Tom had committed to something and wasn't following through. That's when Tom dramatically pushed back from the table and stormed out of the dining room. Eliza remained seated, her eyes fixed downward, silent as a statue. That night, when we got home, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I finally told Eliza that unless Tom contacted me within the week to discuss a payment plan, I was going to take legal action. I wasn't bluffing or making empty threats. I had the signed contract, bank transfer records, everything I needed to make a case. Eliza didn't yell or fight back like I expected. Instead, she just looked at me with cold disappointment and said, "You're choosing money over family." Then she grabbed her overnight bag and left to stay at her parents' place. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've heard absolutely nothing from Tom. But I did check his social media again, because apparently I enjoy torturing myself. He'd posted another photo from that same ski trip, wearing the same smug smirk. This time, the caption read, "Haters going to hate." Eliza had liked that one too. 3 days after she left, Eliza came back home without any warning. I was in the garage working on the car, focused on changing the oil when I heard the front door open. My heart jumped a little, thinking it might be an intruder since I hadn't been expecting anyone. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped into the hallway, where Eliza stood with a small overnight bag. She looked tired but determined. "We need to talk," she said, her voice level and controlled. I put the wrench down, wiped my hands more thoroughly, and followed her inside. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought maybe this would be when the tide turned, when she'd tell me she understood where I was coming from, that principles matter, that agreements should be honored. But that wasn't what she came for. She sat at the kitchen table, her posture rigid, and got straight to the point. According to her, I needed to apologize. Not to her, to Tom. She claimed that bringing up the loan at dinner had publicly humiliated him in front of their family. In her mind, it wasn't fair to corner him like that with their parents present. The fact that he'd been dodging my calls and messages for months, making repayment conversations impossible in private, seemed irrelevant to her. I stood across from her, fighting to keep my voice steady and calm. I told her I wouldn't be apologizing for expecting someone to follow through on an agreement they willingly signed. $12,000 isn't pocket change. It's months of savings, carefully set aside. If Tom wanted respect, I explained, he should have acted with some himself by at least acknowledging the debt, instead of pretending it didn't exist while posting about luxury vacations. She didn't argue right away, which surprised me. Instead, she looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the wood grain pattern as she went quiet. Then she admitted something I hadn't expected. She told me she had been having doubts for a while about Tom ever paying me back. She said she didn't tell me because she didn't want to start a fight between us. According to her, she was hoping he'd surprise us and do the right thing eventually. I asked why she'd let me go through with the loan in the first place if she knew full well this was likely going to happen. She didn't deny it. Didn't even try to argue that she thought differently at the time. She said it was about keeping peace in the family, that if I had said no to Tom's request, it would have caused tension between all of us. She just wanted everyone to stay close, to keep the harmony, even at the expense of our financial security. I told her things were going to change starting immediately. Tom was no longer welcome in our house unless we both agreed beforehand. No more surprise visits, no more sleepovers, no more walking in like our home was an extension of his apartment. Basic boundaries that should have been established years ago. She pushed back immediately, her voice rising with indignation. She said I was being controlling, that Tom was still her brother, would always be part of her life no matter what happened between him and me. I said, "That's fine, but not in our home without boundaries." She didn't like that answer. She stormed off and locked herself in the bedroom, ending the conversation on her terms. That night, after hours of heavy silence in the house, I contacted a lawyer. I explained the loan, the written agreement, the timeline, and the complete lack of payment or even acknowledgement. The lawyer said I had a solid case since the amount was under the small claims limit in our state. The filing would be straightforward, and I didn't need Eliza's approval or involvement to move forward with it. The next morning over coffee, I told Eliza about the legal step I was taking. I was matter-of-fact about it, not trying to provoke her but also not hiding my intentions. She didn't react at first. She just stared at me across the kitchen island, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, like she was looking at a stranger who had somehow infiltrated her home. Then, as if a switch flipped, she started yelling. She accused me of bringing lawyers into something that should have stayed private, a family matter that didn't need outside interference. According to her, I was tearing her family apart over a bit of money and turning a small disagreement into an all-out war. By that evening, things had escalated further. Eliza had packed a full duffel bag, her laptop, and several other personal items. She said she couldn't stay in a house where family is treated like enemies. The way she saw it, my decision to pursue legal action against her brother was a betrayal of the entire family unit. She left without waiting for my response, driving back to her parents' house. I didn't try to stop her. At that point, I wasn't sure there was anything left to say. The next day, before I had a chance to do it myself, Tom sent one last text message that made my decision much easier. "Guess I got the house now, huh?" That was the last straw. Those 7 words confirmed everything I'd suspected about his character and his intentions all along. I blocked his number, his email, and every social media account I could find. He no longer had access to me through any channel, not a text, not a call, not even a comment under a photo. It was a complete digital blackout. Eliza didn't respond to any of my messages after she left. I called twice and left one voicemail asking if we could talk through things rationally. No answer. I sent her a short, direct message asking when she planned to come back and whether we could have a conversation about next steps. Nothing came back. Instead, I got a text from her father, a man who had welcomed me into their family nearly a decade ago, who had shaken my hand at our wedding and called me son. His message was just one sentence. "I'm disappointed and I hope you find it in you to be the bigger man." No acknowledgement of his son's broken promises. No recognition of the principle at stake. Just disappointment in me for standing my ground. I filed the court case that same day. I sent the paperwork to Tom's registered address through certified mail, signature required, so there would be documentation that he received it. I also scanned a copy and emailed it to the address he had used to sign our original agreement. I wanted to make absolutely sure he knew this wasn't an empty threat. I was following through. Later that night, I logged into our joint savings account. Eliza and I had opened it 3 years ago specifically to keep our emergency funds in one place. It wasn't something we used for daily expenses. It was our safety net for unexpected home repairs, medical bills, or other genuine emergencies. Both of us had full access to it, but we had always discussed any withdrawals beforehand as a matter of mutual respect. I hadn't checked the transaction history in months since there was rarely any activity. That's when I noticed the withdrawal, a transaction from 2 weeks ago, right before the family dinner where everything had blown up. Someone had transferred $4,500 out of the account. The note attached to the transaction simply read, "Tom Startup Support." I sat there staring at the screen in disbelief, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. I hadn't authorized any transfer. Eliza had access to the account, of course, but we never had any conversation about giving Tom additional money. That meant she had secretly withdrawn a significant amount from our shared emergency fund and given it to her brother behind my back, without telling me, without discussing it, while knowing full well he had yet to repay a single dollar of the original loan. I didn't call Eliza immediately after discovering the withdrawal. I didn't text her either. I was too stunned, too angry to trust myself with that conversation. Instead, I took screenshots of the transaction details as evidence and scheduled an appointment with my bank for the following morning. My plan was clear. I needed to remove her access to our remaining funds and move the balance into an account with only my name on it. Eliza had drawn her line in the sand with this secret withdrawal, so I was drawing mine. The morning after I discovered the $4,500 withdrawal, I finally called Eliza. She didn't answer the first time, but called back about 5 minutes later. I didn't waste time with pleasantries or beating around the bush. "Why did you pull money from our shared account without telling me?" I asked her directly, my voice calmer than I felt inside. She didn't deny it or even seem surprised that I'd found out. "I was helping family," she said, as if that explained everything. She continued by saying it was her money too, and she had every right to use it how she saw fit. I reminded her that the joint savings was specifically set aside for our home renovation we'd been planning for next spring. We had spent months discussing the kitchen remodel, getting quotes for a new roof, and researching better insulation options. All of that planning now jeopardized because she'd secretly funneled money to her brother. "None of that matters if our family isn't intact," she replied, her voice taking on that self-righteous tone I was becoming increasingly familiar with. She ended the call by stating quite definitively that she didn't need my permission to support her brother. The implication was clear. Tom would always come first, regardless of our plans or agreements. I drove to the bank that same day and sat down with the branch manager. I explained the situation as clinically as I could, leaving out the emotional details. Within an hour, all remaining funds were moved to a new account under my name only. The joint account was frozen, preventing any further withdrawals. Eliza wouldn't be able to access another cent without my knowledge or approval. Later that evening, my phone rang again. It was Eliza, and this time she didn't start calm. She was shouting before I even had a chance to speak, accusing me of being financially abusive and acting like a dictator by restricting her access to money. The words stung, especially since I had spent years being careful with our finances, specifically so we could build a secure future together. I stayed calm during her tirade, waiting for her to run out of steam. When she finally paused to breathe, I simply told her that trust doesn't work one way. If she could move thousands of dollars without telling me, I could move the rest to protect what was left. She hung up without responding, but about 10 minutes later sent a text saying she needed time to think. I didn't reply. There didn't seem to be much left to say. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox from Tom. The subject line read, "Re-legal joke," which perfectly encapsulated his continued refusal to take responsibility. In the message, he claimed he had spoken to someone who knows the law and was informed that I had no case because the money was a gift, not a loan. He argued that our written agreement wasn't legally binding and accused me of twisting the truth. The email ended with a veiled threat that he would fight this tooth and nail, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. I forwarded the entire email to my lawyer without adding any commentary. The response came within an hour. "Good. That email just made your case stronger." Tom had essentially admitted there was an agreement while simultaneously trying to invalidate it. Not exactly the smart legal strategy his supposed expert had advised. That same afternoon, Eliza messaged me again with news that caught me off guard. She said she had hired her own lawyer to protect herself. This confused me because I hadn't threatened her or made any moves against her personally. I hadn't even brought her name into the legal case with Tom. This was strictly between him and me regarding the unpaid loan. But apparently, in her mind, that didn't matter. She felt she needed legal counsel to defend herself from what exactly? I wasn't sure. In the same message, she proposed we meet for dinner on neutral ground. She promised there would be no yelling, just a conversation between two adults. Despite my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe there was still a chance to salvage something from this mess. We picked a small restaurant not far from our house, somewhere quiet with secluded booths in the back where we could talk privately. I arrived about 5 minutes early, mentally preparing myself for whatever was coming. To my surprise, Eliza was already there, sitting at a table with a glass of water and tissues placed neatly by her plate. It seemed she had anticipated this would be an emotional conversation. She didn't wait long before the tears started flowing. Between sobs, she told me I had changed, that I wasn't the man she married anymore. According to her, I was acting cold and harsh, like someone she didn't recognize. I listened without interrupting, letting her get everything off her chest. When she finally finished, I told her the truth as gently as I could. She had changed too. She had transformed into someone who stood by her brother while he took advantage of both of us financially. She had become a person who lied about money and then justified it like it was nothing serious. The woman sitting across from me wasn't entirely the same person I had married either. The conversation didn't last long after that exchange. She looked across the table, her eyes still damp, but suddenly clear and resolute, and said something I'll never forget. If she had to choose between me and Tom, she was going to choose Tom. He was her blood, she repeated, as if that single word explained and excused everything. I didn't argue or try to change her mind. There seemed little point. I just signaled the waiter, paid the bill for both of us, and walked out. In my car outside the restaurant, I didn't immediately drive away. I just sat there, watching people walk by the window, couples holding hands, friends laughing together, families hurting children, all going about their lives like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, my wife had just explicitly chosen her brother over our marriage, and I knew right then that this wasn't just a fight over money or family loyalty. It was something deeper and more fundamental, something that had probably been building for years without me fully recognizing it. When I finally got home, I took a long look around the house. It still had all the signs of Eliza's presence, her coat hanging by the door, her favorite coffee mug on the kitchen counter, the phone charger she always used plugged in next to the couch. But now it all felt like artifacts from a life I wasn't sure existed anymore, or perhaps had never really existed the way I thought it did. The next morning, I had the locks changed. This wasn't meant as punishment or petty revenge. It was a practical precaution. Eliza still had a key to the house, and she had already demonstrated her willingness to move money without asking or informing me. I didn't want to take any chances with other shared assets or personal belongings. I left her a message through her lawyer's contact email, informing them that the house was now secured with new locks and asking for a time when she could collect her remaining belongings. I haven't heard back yet, but I'm fairly certain this isn't the end of the story. I know this situation isn't over yet, because people like Tom don't just fade quietly into the background. They push and prod and escalate until they get their way or are forced to stop. And people like Eliza don't simply back down when their version of reality starts to break apart under scrutiny. If this confrontation at the restaurant was their opening move in what was becoming an increasingly hostile separation, I had a strong feeling the next part would be even worse. My lawyer asked me a seemingly simple but critical question during our next meeting. Did I have anything concrete proving the money I gave Tom was a loan and not a gift, as he was now claiming? I immediately remembered the agreement Tom had signed. We had made 2 copies, both with our signatures and dates clearly marked. I had filed it away over a year ago in my home office and hadn't touched that drawer since. I spent most of that evening meticulously going through the storage cabinet in the home office. I sorted through old tax files, faded receipts, and instruction manuals for appliances we no longer even owned. It took hours of careful searching, but toward the back, behind a stack of dusty insurance forms, I finally found the folder I had used for our wedding paperwork. Inside was the loan agreement, exactly as I remembered it. Neatly typed, signed by both of us, properly dated. But there was something else tucked inside that folder. Another smaller folder I didn't recognize. It had Eliza's handwriting on the cover, labeled simply with Tom's initials. My stomach tightened as I opened it, not sure what I would find, but already sensing it wasn't good. Inside were printouts of numerous Venmo transactions, small amounts that wouldn't raise immediate red flags. $200 here, $350 there, some dating back as far as 18 months. The descriptions were deliberately vague. Groceries, bills, rent, all transfers from our joint account. Every single one had been authorized by Eliza, and I hadn't noticed any of them when they happened because they were small enough to blend into our regular expenses. Near the bottom of the stack were printed emails exchanged between Eliza and Tom. Some were casual checking-in messages, but others were blunt and revealing. One exchange in particular stood out and made my blood run cold. In it, Tom asked Eliza how soon she could send another bridge payment because he had to keep up the broke act a little longer. Her reply was even more devastating. "He's still being cautious, but I think he's close to caving. Just hang on." I sat at our dining table with the folder open in front of me for at least 2 hours. No TV, no phone, no distractions. Just me reading the same lines over and over again, trying to process what I was seeing. These weren't mistakes or misunderstandings that could be explained away. This was a calculated plan that had been thought out, coordinated between siblings, and deliberately kept hidden from me. The extent of the deception was staggering. The next morning, I called my lawyer first thing and scanned every document in the folder. I sent over the entire file, the signed loan agreement, the Venmo transaction printouts, and most damning of all, the email exchanges between Tom and Eliza showing their deliberate conspiracy. My lawyer's response came quickly and was unequivocal. This wasn't just proof of the loan, it was evidence of deliberate financial manipulation and potential fraud. We needed to act fast before either of them could touch any more of our shared assets. With a strange sense of calm that comes after a truly shocking discovery, I called Eliza. She picked up after 3 rings, her voice guarded and distant. I told her exactly what I'd found hidden in our home office. She didn't argue or ask how I discovered the folder. She didn't deny anything or try to explain. She just went utterly silent on the other end of the line. After a long, tense pause on the phone, Eliza finally broke the silence with words that confirmed everything. "You were never supposed to see those." Not a denial, not an apology, just regret that I had discovered their deception. In that moment, the last shred of doubt I might have harbored about her involvement evaporated completely. I didn't raise my voice or launch into accusations. Instead, I asked her something I genuinely needed to know. Had she ever respected me at all? Was our marriage ever real on her end? Or was she always just shielding her brother from the consequences of his choices, using our relationship as a convenient safety net for his financial irresponsibility? Her response was chilling in its casualness. She didn't flinch or hesitate. She simply said I had always been too rigid when it came to money. According to her, Tom needed flexibility that I could afford to give. As if my financial discipline and planning were character flaws rather than responsible adult behavior. As if my unwillingness to endlessly fund her brother's lifestyle without question made me the unreasonable one. I told her firmly that this wasn't about money anymore. It had evolved far beyond that. This was about trust at the most fundamental level, about lying consistently over an extended period and then acting like I was the problem for finally noticing the pattern. I made my position crystal clear. From now on, we're done sharing finances. I want the house title split or sold. No more joint anything. She pushed back instantly, her voice hardening with resolve. She wasn't giving up her share of anything, she declared. According to her, she had sacrificed too much in our marriage to be cut out of the property she had helped maintain. Never mind that I had paid the majority of the mortgage while she spent who knows how much supporting her brother behind my back. That afternoon, I went straight back to my lawyer's office. We filed an emergency motion that same day to freeze access to all our joint assets, house equity, savings, insurance policies, and anything else she might try to access next. The court issued a temporary hold while we sorted through the mess our finances had become. 2 days later, an unmarked letter arrived in my mailbox. There was no return address, but when I opened it, I found a handwritten note from Tom. It read simply, "You're ripping this family apart for the sake of a spreadsheet. Hope it was worth it." No threats or anything explicitly actionable, just that passive-aggressive jab. I scanned it immediately and added it to the growing folder of documentation my lawyer was collecting. I wasn't playing defense anymore, reacting to each new development as it blindsided me. I was taking proactive steps to protect myself. I made a comprehensive list of everything: receipts, account statements, email logs, screenshots, chat backups, anything that could potentially be relevant to the case or the divorce proceedings that now seemed inevitable. I methodically checked every shared subscription we had, canceling all co-managed services one by one. I changed every password tied to anything Eliza ever had access to: utilities, insurance accounts, even the online grocery delivery service we'd used for years. I was systematically untangling our intertwined digital lives, preparing for complete separation. The next morning, I called my contractor to indefinitely postpone the house renovations we'd been planning. We wouldn't be starting the kitchen remodel anytime soon, not with everything up in the air regarding ownership of the house. When he asked if something had happened, I just said plans had changed. It seemed simpler than explaining the collapse of my marriage over financial deception. By the end of that week, I had a full timeline documented in meticulous detail: when the initial loan was made, when the hidden payments started, when Eliza and Tom began coordinating their efforts, every significant discovery, every relevant message, every legal step taken. If things got worse, and I had absolutely no doubt they would, I was determined not to be caught unprepared again. Midweek, I received an unexpected call from a mutual friend of mine and Eliza's. He works remotely from a cafe not far from our neighborhood, one of those trendy places with good Wi-Fi and overpriced coffee that freelancers tend to colonize. He seemed hesitant to get involved, but felt I should know that he had seen Eliza and Tom there 2 days in a row. He wasn't trying to stir up drama, he assured me, but something about their interaction had caught his attention. He described it as a heated meeting, with low voices and tense body language, definitely not casual sibling time over lattes. I sent Eliza a message asking if she was back in the area, keeping my tone neutral and giving no indication of what I'd heard. Her reply was deliberately vague, just saying she was sorting out personal things. No mention of the cafe, no mention of Tom, nothing direct or honest, just another evasion to add to the growing list. That evening, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to visit the cafe myself. I didn't expect to find them there. It was more about confirming my friend's story, and perhaps learning if this was a regular meeting spot. I ordered a coffee and casually asked the barista if 2 people matching their description, a tall guy with a sharp voice, mid-30s woman with auburn hair, had been meeting there recently. The barista recognized them immediately, nodding as I described them. According to her, they'd been coming in every few days for weeks, always claiming the same corner table, always speaking in hushed tones that seemed at odds with normal sibling interaction. This revelation hit me hard. The coordination between them hadn't stopped when Eliza left our home. It had likely never stopped at all. Even during the fake apology attempts and the dramatic dinner where she gave me an ultimatum, she and Tom had still been working together behind my back, probably planning their next move. 2 days later, while I was at work, a neighbor called me. She had seen Tom on my property, walking around the backyard and peering into the windows. She said he didn't knock or leave a note, just stood there for a while looking suspicious before leaving. She thought maybe he was looking for Eliza, but something about his behavior didn't sit right with her, so she decided to let me know. As soon as I got home, I checked the security camera footage. Sure enough, there was Tom, approaching the property at 3:47 p.m., walking down the side of the house, stepping into the backyard, circling once, and then pausing at the back door. He didn't try the handle, but he did lean in close, cupping his hands around his face to look inside through the glass. The whole scene had a predatory feel to it that made my skin crawl. I filed a non-emergency police report that night and submitted the footage as evidence. The officer reviewed the video and confirmed that it did technically count as trespassing. Since Tom hadn't actually entered the house, it wouldn't lead to an arrest, but it would be logged in their system. They advised installing motion-activated lights and sensors and told me to report immediately if it happened again. I sent Eliza a message telling her what had happened, including Tom's unwelcome visit to our property. Her dismissive reply was infuriating. He was probably just confused, as if a grown man wouldn't know better than to prowl around someone else's home uninvited. I sent her the security footage to make it absolutely clear this wasn't a casual misunderstanding, but she never responded to that message. The next day, I contacted a divorce lawyer, a different one from the attorney handling the loan case, someone who specialized specifically in contentious divorces involving financial deception. I started the paperwork immediately, explaining everything: the loan documents, the property concerns, the unauthorized withdrawals, the coordinated deception between siblings. The lawyer said we had a strong case for asset protection given the evidence of deliberate financial manipulation, and advised documenting every interaction going forward with meticulous attention to detail. That same evening, Eliza sent me an email that was clearly crafted to pull at my heartstrings. It was long, emotional, and filled with reminiscences of our early days together. She accused me of erasing 10 years of marriage over what she characterized as a simple misunderstanding about money. According to her, divorce was an extreme and unfair reaction. She claimed I was throwing away everything we had built together just because her brother wasn't perfect, as if this was about personality flaws rather than deliberate deception and theft. I replied with just one line: theft and deception are not misunderstandings, they are choices. I had nothing more to say beyond that fundamental truth. The next morning, I found another handwritten note in my mailbox. No envelope this time, just folded paper shoved carelessly inside. I recognized Tom's handwriting immediately. This one read, "You ruined her. I hope it was worth it." No signature, just those 8 accusatory words. The projection was astounding. He had stolen from me, conspired with my wife behind my back, and somehow I was the villain in his narrative. I took a photo of the note, filed another harassment update with the police, and drove straight to the hardware store. By sundown, the mailbox had a secure lock installed. Eliza showed up at the house the following Saturday without any warning. I was in the driveway washing my car when I saw her get out of a rideshare at the curb. She walked up with a determined stride and asked to come inside to talk like adults. I told her we could talk, but she wasn't coming in. I had no intention of letting her back into the house where she might try to take things or cause a scene without witnesses. I kept the conversation right there on the front porch where neighbors could see us if things escalated. She stood with her arms crossed defensively, sunglasses still on despite the overcast day, creating a barrier between us. Then she delivered her ultimatum in clear, measured terms. "If you don't drop the legal case against Tom, then you and I are officially over." That was her exact wording: a transaction, a trade. As if I was supposed to weigh the 2 options and pick the one that mattered more to me. I didn't hesitate or consider my response. I answered immediately, "Then I guess we're officially over." She didn't cry or argue further, which told me everything I needed to know about how genuine her desire to reconcile had been. She just turned around and walked back to the street without another word. A few minutes later, I watched her rideshare pull away from the curb, taking with it whatever remained of our marriage. The divorce paperwork was already in motion. I submitted the complete file to my attorney, bank transfers, emails, court documents, security footage, witness statements, everything. Whatever story Eliza and Tom were trying to construct about me or about the situation, they would have to explain it all in court, under oath, without my participation in their narrative. The court date for the small claims case against Tom arrived early on a Tuesday morning. Small claims court wasn't the dramatic, wood-paneled courtroom you see in movies, just a basic room with worn benches, humming fluorescent lights, and a clerk who called out names without looking up from her paperwork. My lawyer and I arrived 15 minutes early, organized and prepared with every document we might need. I had a binder with all the evidence neatly arranged: the signed loan agreement, bank statements showing the transfer, emails and receipts documenting the lack of repayment, and of course, the damning correspondence between Eliza and Tom. We waited in silence as the minutes ticked by, 10 minutes, then 15. Other cases were called and quickly processed around us. Just as the judge was about to call our case without Tom present, he walked in. He had no lawyer with him, just a wrinkled button-down shirt that looked like he'd slept in it, a notebook clutched in one hand, and that same smug look I'd seen in countless family photos I now regretted being part of. But he wasn't alone. Eliza followed Tom into the courtroom, her face set in a mask of determination. She looked stiff and uncomfortable, hands clenched tightly around her bag strap until her knuckles were white. She walked right past me without so much as a glance and sat beside Tom in a show of solidarity that shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow still did. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "We expected a neutral statement from her, not this." It seemed Eliza had made her choice even more definitively than I'd realized. When the case began, the judge asked each party to confirm their identity. I gave mine, then Tom gave his. Then, unexpectedly, Eliza stood up and announced that despite her lawyer's advice, she wanted to offer a statement on behalf of her brother. My stomach tightened as I prepared for whatever was coming. She spoke with practiced conviction, claiming the money was never meant to be repaid. According to her version of events, we had always discussed it as a gift to help Tom get back on his feet after a rough period. She said the signed agreement was something I had pressured Tom into during what she described as a family emergency, calling it a case of emotional duress. She even had the audacity to imply that I had manipulated both of them by weaponizing money throughout our relationship. My lawyer didn't flinch or show any reaction to these accusations. She waited patiently until Eliza had finished her performance, then calmly handed over the printed chain of emails between Eliza and Tom, the same ones I had discovered in that hidden folder. The ones where they discussed keeping up the broke act and how I would cave soon to their pressure. The evidence that directly contradicted everything Eliza had just testified to. The moment the judge began reading these exchanges, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted noticeably. He looked up and asked Eliza directly why she had continued to send money and coordinate with Tom if she truly believed the loan agreement was invalid or coerced. It was a simple but devastating question that cut straight to the heart of their deception. Eliza didn't have a good answer prepared for this. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat and finally said, "I didn't think it would go this far." Not a denial of the evidence, just regret that it had come to light and led to legal consequences. Tom couldn't maintain his composure under pressure. He suddenly blurted out, "It was all Eliza's idea anyway," throwing his sister under the bus the moment things got difficult. The judge raised a skeptical eyebrow at this attempt to redirect blame. Eliza turned to Tom with a look of pure betrayal, glaring daggers at him and hissing something under her breath that the court reporter didn't catch. But I saw the expression on her face, the same look she used to give whenever someone disagreed with her at a family dinner table. That flash of cold anger when she didn't get her way. The judge called for a pause in the proceedings. He requested that all written communications between all parties be submitted formally before any ruling would be made. The case wasn't dismissed as Tom and Eliza had clearly hoped. It was merely postponed for review of the additional evidence. My lawyer assured me this was actually good news, as it gave us time to organize our documentation even more thoroughly. Outside the courthouse, I was making my way across the parking lot to my car when I heard rapid footsteps behind me. Eliza had followed me out and she was furious. She accused me of deliberately humiliating her in front of a judge and making her look like a liar. I didn't engage with her theatrics or respond to her accusations. I simply told her that she had humiliated herself by taking the stand for someone who had stolen from both of us, and that no one had forced her to testify with false information. I turned away without waiting for her response and continued to my car. Later that night, I received an email from Eliza's legal team. The message attempted to play on my emotions, reminding me of the emotional toll the situation was having on all parties involved. They asked if I would consider mediation instead of continuing with the case and divorce proceedings. I forwarded the email to my lawyer without responding directly. Their attempt to appeal to my sympathy felt hollow after everything that had transpired. That same week, we attempted to serve Tom with a second motion for damages, but when the process server went to his last known residence, the address on file with the court, they found the apartment empty. Neighbors in the building said he'd moved out just days earlier, leaving no forwarding address or updated contact information. He had essentially disappeared, likely hoping to evade further legal accountability. We immediately filed a contempt of court motion. My lawyer explained that skipping town in the middle of an active legal case wouldn't play well with the judge. It would only strengthen our position and potentially result in a default judgment in our favor. While that motion was being processed, I also began the final stage of asset separation in the divorce proceedings. The house was now under legal freeze pending division. All accounts were formally split, shared insurance policies were canceled, and Eliza's access to anything under my name was completely removed. I submitted a request for a full financial disclosure from her side and my attorney sent official notices to secure every record connected to our 10-year marriage. Bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts, everything. Whatever Eliza and Tom had planned, it was unraveling rapidly. I wasn't chasing either of them anymore, or trying to reason with people who had proven themselves dishonest at every turn. Instead, I was methodically documenting everything, closing every potential loophole, and pushing the legal process forward one paper at a time. Whatever outcome they had expected from their scheme, it wasn't going to end the way they had hoped. A few days after the court appearance, my lawyer received official notice from the judge's office. A formal investigation was being opened into the validity of Eliza's testimony and Tom's financial dealings. The submitted emails, text logs, and glaring contradictions between Eliza and Tom's statements were enough to raise serious legal concerns beyond just the small claims dispute. This had evolved from a simple case of an unpaid loan into potential perjury and fraud charges. That same week, Eliza returned to the house one final time to collect the rest of her belongings. She didn't speak much during the process. Her father came with her, acting as both emotional support and physical help with the moving. But he didn't look at me once during the entire visit. No acknowledgement, no conversation, not even eye contact. They moved from room to room in uncomfortable silence, loading boxes into his car. I didn't offer help or follow them around monitoring what they took. I simply stayed in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reviewing paperwork while they gathered her things. Once they were gone, I immediately changed every lock in the house again, including the garage and back door. Not because I expected them to return with the old keys, but because it felt like closing a chapter definitively. I sent formal confirmation of access termination to my lawyer and locked down the remaining financial accounts permanently. The physical separation was now complete, matching the emotional one that had been growing for months. 2 days later, while cleaning out the basement and sorting through years of accumulated possessions, I came across a dusty plastic tub wedged behind a shelf of holiday decorations. Inside was an old external hard drive I hadn't seen in years. I suddenly remembered that Tom had left it behind during one of the extended periods he crashed at our place while supposedly building his startup. I had completely forgotten about its existence until that moment. I stared at the device for a few minutes before deciding to plug it in and see what it contained. Most of the files were disorganized messes, half-finished business plans, poorly constructed budget mock-ups, graphic templates with amateurish logos. None of it mentioned my loan or provided any useful information about his supposed business venture. I scrolled through folder after folder of meaningless documents until I found one labeled simply pitch material. Inside was a Word document with no title and an audio file that caught my attention. The sound quality wasn't polished, just a raw rehearsal file with background noise. I remembered Tom used to record everything while brainstorming, claiming it helped him develop his ideas. But this particular recording captured something he never intended anyone else to hear. The file I found outlined, step by step, exactly how Tom had planned to approach me for the money. It wasn't just his strategy. It included specific cues for Eliza about when she should casually bring up his business idea, how she should frame it as temporary help rather than a significant loan, and detailed suggestions for how to play off any doubts I might express as me simply overthinking things. There was even a line that read, "Let him feel in control by signing paperwork. It'll calm him down." The whole document was essentially a script for manipulating me into giving them money. I sent the file straight to my lawyer without hesitation. Near the end of the folder, I found an audio recording labeled simply "mixed down one." When I hit play, I heard Tom's voice first, followed by Eliza's. The conversation wasn't edited or prepared. There was no background music or polished presentation. It was just the two of them laughing quietly together and rehearsing exactly how they would convince me to loan the money. Eliza's voice came through with perfect clarity. "Just sign whatever he wants. It'll make it look official, but we know it's not real." Hearing those words in her familiar voice, the same voice that had told me she loved me for nearly a decade, was like a physical blow. I forwarded the recording to my lawyer immediately. Within the hour, he replied with a message that summed up the situation perfectly. "This changes everything." We filed a motion to reopen the financial dispute, this time adding charges of conspiracy and fraud against both Eliza and Tom. Attached to the filing were all the documents, emails, and the full transcript of the damning audio recording that proved beyond any doubt that they had planned this deception from the beginning. Eliza's new lawyer responded quickly with a cease and desist letter, accusing me of spying and illegally collecting private communications. My lawyer replied that the drive had been located on my property, left behind voluntarily by Tom, and therefore legally belonged to me. Their attempt to suppress the evidence had no legal standing whatsoever. Days later, Eliza's legal team abruptly withdrew their complaint entirely, a clear sign they recognized the weakness of their position. Then came an unexpected offer. Eliza's team proposed a settlement. She would waive all claims to spousal support, give up her share of the remaining joint savings, and remove her name from the house title if I agreed not to pursue the fraud charge against her. It was essentially an admission of guilt wrapped in a desperate attempt to avoid consequences. I declined the offer without hesitation. This wasn't about money or property anymore. It had evolved into something much more fundamental. I wanted the court record to reflect what had actually happened. I didn't want a quiet trade where they could walk away and potentially portray themselves as victims. I wanted accountability and a formal acknowledgement of their deliberate deception. Tom vanished completely after that. Court servers couldn't locate him at any known address or place of employment. The motion to hold him in contempt was filed and accepted, and a judge ordered a warrant for his appearance in court. Meanwhile, Eliza's legal team sent another message, this time practically begging for mediation, their tone markedly different from their earlier confidence. I agreed to mediation, but only under specific conditions. The entire session would be recorded, and Eliza would speak under oath. The mediation took place in a neutral office space downtown, with my lawyer present throughout. Eliza arrived wearing the same guarded expression she'd worn in court, tight-lipped, visibly tired but still maintaining that defensive posture. The session was recorded from start to finish as I had requested. Under the pressure of speaking under oath, with the recording running and the evidence already in the open, Eliza finally admitted what I had already confirmed through the documents. She and Tom had indeed discussed how to manipulate me into giving the money. She admitted they knew I would never agree if they were honest about their intentions. When I asked her the one question that had been haunting me, why she didn't just ask me for help directly, and honestly if her brother needed financial assistance, her reply was quiet but revealing, "Because I knew you'd say no." That simple admission spoke volumes about how she viewed me and our relationship. She had preferred elaborate deception over honest communication because she assumed I wouldn't support her if she told the truth. A few weeks later, the judge issued the final ruling on the small claims case. Tom was ordered to repay the full $12,000 with interest and legal fees, regardless of whether he appeared in court to defend himself. Additionally, Eliza was ordered to reimburse half of the $4,500 she had withdrawn from our joint account without my knowledge or consent. The fraud motion was upheld in the court record, firmly establishing their deception as a matter of legal fact, even if Tom wasn't present to face the consequences directly. Our divorce was finalized shortly after the financial rulings. Given the overwhelming evidence of deception and financial misconduct, Eliza received no spousal support, no share in the house we had built together, and no access to my retirement accounts or other benefits. My lawyer filed the final property division paperwork, and everything we had once built together was legally untied. The marriage that had defined nearly a decade of my life was officially over. I spent the next few weeks repainting the house, starting with Eliza's favorite accent wall in the dining room. The vibrant blue she had chosen years ago became a calm, neutral slate gray. I boxed up every photo and decoration she had left behind and donated most of it to local charity shops. I completely replaced the furniture in the guest room Tom had frequently used, eliminating any remaining traces of his presence in my home. I even rekeyed the back gate, just in case either of them still had access somehow. One afternoon, I opened the mailbox to find one last letter with no return address. The handwriting on the envelope was immediately recognizable as Tom's. I started to read it, but the only words I got through before tearing it up were, "Enjoy your empty house, traitor." I didn't need to subject myself to the rest of whatever toxic message he had sent. I tore the letter into tiny pieces and dropped them into the recycling bin without a second thought. I had permanently blocked both Eliza and Tom from every possible communication channel, phone numbers, email addresses, all social media platforms. They were gone from my digital life as completely as they were from my physical one. They were also legally restricted from contacting me through any channel following their harassment attempts, giving me at least some peace of mind that the severance was complete. I now attend weekly therapy sessions, not to grieve the loss of a marriage that had clearly been built on deception, but to understand how I had lived beside someone for nearly a decade without recognizing how easily they could lie to my face. How I had missed the signs that should have been obvious. The therapist is helping me recognize that the failure wasn't mine, that skilled manipulators can deceive even the most cautious people. But there's still a part of me that wonders how I could have been so blind for so long. Last night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, enjoying the peaceful evening. The air was quiet, with only the distant sounds of neighborhood life breaking the silence. The motion-activated lights in the backyard flicked on briefly when a stray cat wandered through, then returned to darkness, with no uninvited visitors to disturb them. For the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of calm. No one was trying to borrow money from me, trick me into giving them something they hadn't earned, or guilt me into sacrificing my financial security for their benefit. My brother-in-law betrayed me through calculated deception and financial manipulation. My wife helped him do it, choosing family loyalty over marital honesty at every turn. And now they are exactly where they belong, out of my life, far away from the man they never expected would fight back and hold them accountable for their actions.